Jeremy, thank you for those kind words. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted you're here. I understand you're from all over the country, and this is kind of a tough time here in Texas with all the rain we've had, the challenges we've been facing the last few weeks. But it's good to have you nonetheless in the midst of all this. And I know this man, and I know Jen, and I know his 7 kids. In fact, one time when they were traveling across the country, they stopped here in Austin, and my wife and I had them all over for breakfast one day. And at the end of that event, I was telling Jeremy, I think we had more food on the floor than we ever had on the table to begin with. You know, I got a picture of that where all these kids have been sitting around the table and all this food on the floor. We love you guys. It is just delightful to be here and to see you again. You know, when Jeremy asked me to tell you this story about leadership and servant leadership in particular, you know, my story is just that. And each of you have different stories. I always love sitting down and asking people what they're doing and what their passions are and where their lives may lead them. You know, I'm not very good at predicting things, and some people perhaps can set out a course and maybe 10 or 15 years from now want to be doing something. I tried that once and it didn't work for me. And so maybe you're better at that than I am. But for me, really, it's been a work of God in my life. And it's interesting to be here in this building in Austin right now because my office is on the northwest side of the city, and driving in just now, it occurred to me I became a believer when I was 18 years old, a block from here. Adobe high-rise dormitory is right over here, a 25-story dormitory. My sophomore year here at UT, I roomed with a believer. And one night, we just started talking about spiritual things, and the next morning, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior right over here on the 24th floor. And so it's kind of interesting. Here I am talking about my faith, and that's where it began, right over there. And so that's why I'm here. I don't think God would really put me in this role without that, because it is a story of what He's done in my life. My family, I'm married to Nancy. We've been married 38 years. I've got 2 adult daughters. My older daughter is married, has 2 kids, lives here in Austin. And then my younger daughter lives up in Dallas. She does labor and delivery work as a nurse for Baylor Medical Center, and just love those kids. And my older daughter has 2 grandkids. And grandkids are great. We had them over this past weekend and just thoroughly enjoyed our time together. As Jeremy said, our organization, when I began, I've been there 30 years, which no one ever sets out to be anywhere for 30 years. I didn't. I thought I got there as a chief financial officer, and I thought I would learn a few things. Small company, maybe 40 employees, maybe 50 million in assets. And I met a guy. And it's interesting how God just inserts people into your life that can change your life dramatically. This guy was the CEO of that company at the time, and I wasn't even looking for a job. I was actually going to a meeting up in Dallas, and Southwest Airlines was running late, so by the time I got to Dallas and into the hotel, the meeting had begun. And the only place to sit was front row, next to this older guy who we introduced each other during the morning break. We had lunch together, and at lunch he begins describing this role he's creating, where he's bringing together accounting, finance, IT under one person, and he's thinking about hiring that person. And the whole time he's talking, I'm kind of listening. But really what's attractive to me is him. There's something about this guy that is attractive to me. And I'm thinking, this man could ask me to mop floors, and I would probably take the job just to hang out with him and learn from him. And lo and behold, about 2 months later, he called me up, and on a Saturday morning, I went in for the interview, and I was dressed like this. He was dressed in shorts and a golf shirt and sneakers. And after about a two-hour, I'll call it an informal interview, he offered me that role. And then he began to show me what servant leadership is like. You know, I'd always heard that term. You hear it, servant leadership. But he was the first one who actually brought that to life for me. And the things that would come up just in the natural course of life, living, business, he would take and transform into something special. I remember early on in our relationship, we messed up something royally, and we needed to write off $25,000, which at that time was a lot of money for us. And so I got the explanation in my head. I figured out what was going on, and I went in to give him the bad news. And he sat down and he listened, and I explained what happened, how we were going to fix it going forward, but we needed to write off $25,000. And the last thing I said was, and if I no longer have a job here, I'll understand why. And he looked at me, with a big grin on his face, and he said, "Not have a job here? The way I see it, I just spent $25,000 to train you because that isn't ever going to happen again, right?" I said, "Right." You know, that's grace. And when someone extends you that kind of grace, you find yourself doing similar things with the people around you because, as we all know, forgiveness in situations like that is just tremendous. It's so unnatural to do that kind of a thing. Or one time, he and his wife were coming back from some kind of an event, and I got this story secondhand. It used to be the Austin airport. It used to be close in, old airport. And, you know, I do a lot of travel. When I get home, I'm tired. I just want to go home and crawl into bed and get some sleep. And she waits at the terminal while he goes out to get the car to come back and pick her up. She gets into a conversation with a young lady who has a baby in her arms and finds out that she has been stood up. She needed a ride. She's a soldier's wife. They're stationed at Fort Hood, which is about an hour's drive north of here, and got stood up. And so when he shows up with the car, guess what? His wife says, "Honey, this young lady needs a ride to Fort Hood, so we're gonna give him a ride to Fort Hood." So they get him in the car, drive all the way up there, and then back home, you know. And I'm thinking, gee, would I do that? Would I do that? Another time, I go out into the lobby of our building at the time, and had these two bathrooms in front that seemed to always have problems. And one of them had a real bad problem one day. So there's our CEO out in the lobby with a mop, cleaning up the mess. You know, and I looked at him and I thought, oh, that's what a CEO does. I didn't realize CEOs did that kind of thing. You know, but when someone does that around you, as time passes, you realize the gap that exists between my understanding of what servant leadership is and what it really can be and should be. And so I hope that you have people around you like that. If you ever find someone like that in your life, latch onto them. Because I think so much of the success that I've had professionally has been just through mentoring, through somebody extending a hand, grabbing a hold of mine, and showing the way. You know, relationships are God asks us to do two things: love God and love people. And on the love God side of this, what I found out in leadership is that it's important for all of us in here. You know, all of you are aspiring leaders in ministry of various kinds, probably, perhaps other professional careers that you have in mind. And what I found over the years is that in a case like mine, where I lead about 550 people in 20 different locations, and I get up in the morning, and my quiet time is about 6:15, and Jeremy knows this because we've had conversations about this. I can't imagine getting in my car and going to work without sitting down and grounding myself. And I will sit there in the dark. I have a chair, my chair, and it's dark. I've got my iPad, and I pull up my schedule for the day, and it's usually pretty busy, as is today's. And I will go through the schedule. I'll envision each event that is on that schedule this day, and I'll envision who's going to be there, even the faces. If we're all sitting around a table, I try to picture the faces in my mind, what the objective of that event is for the day, and what, if that event's going to be successful, what I need to do during that event to do everything in my power to make it successful so we get the outcomes that we're wanting. And I go through there event by event, so that by the time I get in my car, my day is pretty well crystallized in my mind. And I ask God, be with me, help me be present, fully present at these events, and use me as a tool in these events to do what you want to do. And I call that leading into the day. For an organization like ours, where that many people are depending on me for their livelihood, you know, they've got families at home, they're wanting to put food on the table, the jobs are important to them. I need to make sure I have my act together and that God can use me day by day in those things. So I just encourage you, no matter what your role is, if you're not doing that today, I just encourage you, please give that some thought and structure that into your days, because I think it's huge in the way that God can actually use us and open up our eyes to the opportunities that we encounter day by day. I want to make sure that I've covered. This former boss of mine, having a chief financial officer, you know, everybody needs one. Everybody needs a bean counter. But about five, I'm sorry? Like I said, everybody needs a bean counter. One day years ago, he came in my office, and he comes in, he closes the door, and he sits down in front of me, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, something's about to happen here. And he says, Tony, my wife and I got together this weekend, and we discussed our future together, and we decided I would work 5 more years and then retire. And I'm telling you this because you've expressed interest in being a CEO, and this isn't my job to give you. Our board will make that call. But there are some things you need to focus on in the next 5 years to be seriously considered. I said, great. Pulled out a pad, got my pen ready to write, and I said, what are they? And he said, well, number one, when I come in your office, it's never very welcoming because your back is to the door, and you're engrossed in some Excel spreadsheet, probably a big, massive spreadsheet, and you're convinced that if everything across the bottom of that foot sheet fits beautifully, that all is well with the world, right? And I said, right. And he said, well, with all due respect to you and to finance and accounting, this actually isn't a numbers business. This business is about people. It's about relationships. Relationships drive business. And Tony, quite frankly, you stink at relationships. You're just bad at it. And he said, that's the bad news. The good news is we still have 5 years together, and if you'll let me, I will hold your hand and I will show you what relationships will do, not only for your career and to position you to be considered a CEO, but for this business or any business you might lead down the road. And so that man poured himself into me the last 5 years he was there. And he held my hand through so many different things, and I wouldn't be standing here without the impact that he's had on my life. And again, just as he extended me grace, having now mentored me, kind of held my hand through all that, when someone does that for me, I feel compelled to do that for others. And so we have an organization that focuses very intensely on that. And we have these individual development plans, person by person, and we ask them, what do you want to do? And don't give me the credit union answer. I want to know what you want to do with your life. Maybe you want to work here 2 or 3 years, and then you want to go to do the real thing you want to do. What's the real thing you want to do? And when you can get people to open up and talk about those things, then you can begin partnering with them. You can say, okay, well, during the 3 years you're going to be here, let us help you get this far. And we help them get further on their career track while they're helping us doing the job that we need done. And everybody wins in that proposition. And we fully know that at a certain point they're going to leave and go off and do something. I had a young lady that came here at UT. She wanted to be a part-time teller. She's just very, very blunt. She said, you're going to have me 4 years. And when I've got my undergraduate degree here from UT, I'm going to go to Houston. I want to be a doctor. I want to go to medical school there. And that was years ago. Today, she's probably some hotshot physician down in Houston doing really great. But we knew that we had her for 4 years on a part-time basis, and it was a beautiful thing. And she did great work for us, and we helped her get through undergrad studies. But it's important to have someone you trust that you can share your life passions with, and that they'll partner with you. And this man did that for me. Today, still talking about this job, today I spent about 1/3 of my time on our company. And God, through the grace of our board, I just have a generous board. And I don't mean to really depict it as a Christian organization. This is very much a secular organization, but I see how God is using my directors in the course of that business's life and in my life. Despite the fact that they, in some cases, are atheists, they're still being used by Him in a mighty way there. But they've allowed me to begin looking more externally in our community. I spend only about 1/3 of my time today on things that have something to do with that business. The rest of it I've charged to an executive vice president, and his role is to look internally and mine is external. And so it's kind of neat being an organization where you can look out into your city as a believer and try to find needs that exist in the community, and then using the resources of an organization like ours, a secular organization, to meet the needs of the city and trying to get lift and quality of life in so many different ways. And my board encourages me to do that. Go figure. It's kind of neat. And so sometimes, I'm thinking, why am I not at a big bank somewhere? Why am I at a not-for-profit financial cooperative in Austin, Texas? Well, and then I think about that, and God answers our prayers, and He puts us in the right roles, and then uses us in a mighty way if we'll allow that to happen. So I'm just blessed to be in a role like that. I'll encourage you to do one thing. In leadership development, in organizational development in our company, sometimes you have leaders that want to get things done. And we have lists of things to do. Everybody's trying to check things off. And one of the things I've encouraged people to do is to focus on who we are first. Leadership begins with leading me. I've got to lead myself well before I can think about leading someone else well. And a lot of that has to do with doing, or rather with being rather than doing. We focus on doing a lot. I think that's the American way, you know. There's just always something to do, and it needs to be done by this time, and if it's not done by then, I beat myself up or somebody else beats me up about it, you know. But focusing on who I am is critically important, and being able to answer that question. In fact, I'm putting my leadership team through this right now. We have about 70 people in leadership roles, and each quarter I break them down in small teams of 3 to 4. And right now they're coming through my office, and we're spending 90 minutes together. And I'm asking them to answer one question. And they're told in advance what the question is. The question is simply, who are you? And I stole this from Cirque du Soleil. I went to a meeting up in New York probably about 3 or 4 years ago. There's a company called HDR or something. I think they're out of Madrid. And they arrange these global events where they bring in world-class speakers, and this event was 3 days in Radio City Music Hall, and they brought people in globally on the topic of innovation. Everybody had an innovative kind of a message to deliver. And the woman who heads up HR for Cirque gets up to make this presentation. And the stage is darkened, and all there is a spotlight in the middle of it. I think she might have been able to see us, but we had just her up there, no PowerPoint. And this woman with no notes whatsoever stands there as if she's giving this performance, perfect posture, and for an hour she delivers this presentation. And in that presentation she described the hiring practices of Cirque. And apparently if you go to apply for a job in a Cirque production, they similarly bring you out on a darkened stage like that, but where she could see the audience that day. If you're an applicant, you can't see the audience. All you see is darkness. And this light is directly on you, and this voice out of the darkness comes and just says, who are you? And most of them, she said, respond by saying, well, I'm such and such, and I'm from Romania, and I won a gold medal in the last Olympics in this sport, and I'm a gymnast, and this and that, and they kind of go on, and when they finish, there's silence. Then the voice comes back and says, who are you? And maybe the second time they may do some gymnastics up on the stage, you know, and show the prowess they have as an athlete. And this question just keeps coming back, and they get quite frustrated. But what Cirque is trying to do is figure out, is this person this part? We don't want an actor to hire to put in this role. We want to hire this role. And so they're trying to probe and get these people to open up and disclose, who are they? What are their passions? What is their background? Are they this role they're applying for, or is it going to be a stretch for them to pretend to be that role? And so that's one of the reasons their productions are so amazing, and that they have the right people in the right slots. And they go to a lot of trouble to make sure that they're hiring well. And so I've begun using that internally. And when you use that in a business setting, you know, I've got to be careful. And I tell them why I'm doing it, because we need a staff that is fully engaged. Much as those of you who are in ministry, you don't need any slackers in ministry. You need people who love Jesus and show it and are as excited about being saved today as they were whatever had happened, and they want to share their faith with other people. In the same respect, in business, we compete through the engagement of our staff. I don't need 550 people who are just sitting around, and maybe even those who are doing some things. I need them actively engaged, trying to make good things happen for our members, for each other internally. And so to do that, I need folks who are sold out to who we are. And so I ask these managers, you know, if you're going to lead great people, I'd like for you to tell me who you are and why it is you're in this role. Why are you here? And these meetings have been extraordinary, because I tell them the Cirque story, and they've heard that before, and then I go first. I said, I'm putting you on the spot, so I'm going to go first and tell you who I am. And my presentation has to do with 3 people that I've met. And the first one that I met was Jesus, and I tell them the story about Dobie Mall here and what that relationship means to me as a CEO, leading an organization. And the second person, Burton Eubanks, the man that I worked for so many years, and I tell him some similar things that I've told you about Burton Eubanks. And the last one, you know, I've given a lot of thought to this. There's a guy named Ed Silvoso that I know you know, and perhaps other of you have run into. Argentine guy who's written a book, Anointed for Business. That book connected with me beautifully about 10 years ago when I realized that what I do for a living and my faith are fully integrated. You know, sometimes if you listen to those who espouse to be very knowledgeable people, especially in business, they'll tell you, well, you got to keep these things separate. You know, there's your business life, and then there might be your spiritual life and your family life and these other things that you have going. And Ed Silvoso kind of throws all that out. He uses Jesus as the ultimate example of how this is actually all integrated. It's all integrated into one life. And that made a huge impact on me, and so I tell them that. And I tell them, so that's why I am the way I am, the things that you see in me, how I operate the business, my priorities, this is what's driving that. This is who I am. Now, let's talk about who you are. And they take turns going through this, and the meetings have been really, really something. We shed tears. We've gone through about a box of Kleenex as people have gone through just talking about the tough things that are going on in their lives. But I tell you that story because in your own roles, as you're looking at ministry, be absolutely certain that you know who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And because it's going to be tough to really connect with people otherwise. And I think God can do what he wants to do, but I think if we are there with them and just day by day we're connecting with them and asking that he use us in a powerful way, I think some beautiful things can come about if we're well-grounded and have a really good idea of what we're trying to do through that. But the things that flow out of that, anytime you join our company, you meet with me. When we have 6 to 8 employees that have come in, there's a 90-minute meeting in my office where I go through our values and our culture. And at the end of that, I tell them who I am. I tell them my priorities. Love God, loving my wife, loving my families, my family, my daughters, my extended family, my job being ranked maybe 4 or 5, and the things that are important to me. And I also tell them, you know, you don't need to be me. You don't have to have my values to be successful here, but I want you to know what yours are. If I ask you what are the top 5 things most important to you, you better have an answer. And then tell me if you are well aligned with what this business is trying to do. We love people. We love relationships, foundation. They form the foundation of everything we do. Is there alignment there between you and us? And if there is, great, we can do good work together. If there's no alignment, you don't like people, you don't value relationships, it doesn't make you a bad person. But you made a mistake coming to work here, and the best thing you can do after this meeting is to go down to HR and reside and go work for somebody down the street where you and they are congruent. And I get to have somebody go down to HR and resign, but if it happened, it would be a good thing for us and for them. So that's a great conversation to have. But with new leaders as they come in, lunches with employees at large, meeting with our senior team, one-on-one meetings with people, personal coaching, I just can't tell you how critical connecting with folks, understanding who they are, making sure they understand who I am, and looking for the congruence, the alignment that exists there between us where we can do good work together. But a lot of that comes from, again, having this outward focus and wanting to be used by God powerfully in these circumstances. I'm going to stop there, and I know you know a lot about me. If there's anything else that you want me to talk about, I'd be happy to, and I'd be happy to address whatever questions you might have today.
I'm Chris from Atlanta, Georgia, on staff at Campus Renewal. When I first heard you come in and had the title of CEO of a large credit union and saw you come in there too and whatnot, I thought, man, this is going to be somebody like, it's going to be talking down to us, like we're in ministry, but God really humbled me, and it's really humbling to hear you speak from knowing yourself and not pretending to be somebody and not pretending to be maybe even better than us. And so, anyways, I just was really struck by you actually do kind of speak from a position. So, and secondly, my question is, you talked a lot about yourself and how does one get to know yourself?
Wow, how does somebody get to know oneself? That's a good question. I can tell you how I've tried to do that. That's just one way. 10 years ago, I got a good friend to recommend to me a personal coach that he had used. And this guy was a CEO in another organization, and he described how this coach had helped him. This man was based in Phoenix, and I thought, okay, I need to be a better CEO. I want to learn more about myself, get better. I'm going to connect with this man. And so he and I engaged for a 6-month period. And he began this by asking me to identify 6 people in my life who knew me well, preferably 5 in the office and my wife, if I was willing to go along with it. The wife thing is risky. And so I gave him a list of these 5 people in the office, other executives and my wife, and he sent them by email this questionnaire to fill out about me, the long assessment. And they gladly completed that, and they sent it back to him in Phoenix, and then he flew out to Austin with his wife, and he and his wife and my wife and I had dinner and got to know each other face to face for the first time. And then he came into our office the next day. And he met with each of those 6 people face to face and went through everything that they had written about me and got them to further elaborate. And at the end, he might have said, well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your perspective about Tony. I'd like to share this with him, but not just give this to him. I want to give it to him and put Chris across the top of it. I want him to know it was Chris who said these things about him. Can I get your permission to do that? And they had all said some good things about me, but they'd also said some other things I needed to hear. And he's pretty convincing. And so they all 6 said yes. He goes back home, and I get a phone call one day, and he says, Tony, FedEx just picked up this package here. You're going to have it in your office tomorrow. And when you get this, do not open this in the office. You take it home. Sometime this weekend, you open this up and you read it. And then next Wednesday, we began weekly 90-minute phone calls. Said, next Wednesday, when you call me, we will begin going through this. So this package arrives, and I'm dying to open it, but I don't. I throw it in my bag, and I take it home, and on a Saturday night, November Saturday night, this is like 10 years ago, I open this up, and I begin reading. And the first page, there's a woman named Sheila, who's one of my marketing and business development executives. And Sheila says a lot of great things about me, and I'm feeling real good. But then it gets interesting. And words like judgmental show up. And then she says, by the way, these are great examples of how Tony can be judgmental. And other words like arrogant show up. And this is how arrogance looks in his life. And she gives a great example. Just kind of went on and on and on. And I get to the bottom of this, and I'm thinking, gee, I thought Sheila knew me better than that. And I flip the page. And the second one was pretty much a mirror image of the first one, as were all of them. And so you get to the end of that document, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow. And I went for a long walk just to try to kind of slough that off, And I thought a lot about that until the following Wednesday when I call him up. His name's Mark, and Mark says, good morning, Tony. How do you feel? I said, well, Mark, I feel like dirt. And he said, good. That's a good place to begin. And then for the next 6 months, he just brutalized me. and we explored all of those issues. We read 13 books together, and he put me through exercises week by week. They were just truly extraordinary and just opened up my eyes to the weaknesses that I have in my life. And going through an exercise like that, I am who I am. I still have the same DNA, obviously, that I had prior to that encounter here 10 years later. What's different is that I know myself better. And I find myself in certain circumstances in life where my initial inclination might be to do something or say something or think something about someone, about something, about certain circumstances. And now I can catch myself in the process of doing it. And I can sense, oh, yeah, that's the me, that's the old me. It's kind of going off that direction, but that's unproductive. So I can consciously choose to go this way. And that guy was just hugely, hugely influential in my life. And the interesting thing about programs like that, and that was done in a safe environment, where he told those 6 people, he's not going to tell my wife she can't be fired, but he told the other 5, you're not going to be fired. If Tony even says anything about this for the next 6 months, you call me. I'll take care of it, So they felt safe enough to open up and say the things that I needed to hear. But one of the things that came out of that I thought was extraordinary is that sometimes we think we can hide who we really are from other people. And people are much smarter than that. The people that you hang out with, that I hang out with, they know you. They know me. They obviously knew me pretty well. And one thing fascinating about it, you talk about grace extended, these people, despite the fact that they knew me, the real me, they still chose to hang around and work with me. Go figure. It's one of the things that occurred to me on that long walk. I thought, wow, here I've been striving to be a perfect CEO, obviously not doing a very good job of it, And these people not only know that I'm not perfect and never have any chance of hitting perfection, they're going to be happy with some level of excellence. They're going to let me drop down that standard somewhat and still love me and work with me and do great things together. And that to me was a huge revelation. And it gives you a freedom to just be yourself, to just kind of let the weight that we put on ourselves sometimes as leaders, just set that aside. Let God lead you, lead me through these circumstances to be the best we can be in these roles. And to just not be, I guess, not inappropriately set standards there that we can't hit and that others know we can't hit, and that in the end do more damage than good. But that's one of the ways that I've really found out who I am. And God just really blessed me through that program. And the neat thing is, I just encourage you too, if you have opportunities to go through a program like that, by all means do it. If you have people in your life who love you, whom you trust, ask them to be direct with you about whatever is going on in your life that you need feedback on, or are there things that I need to improve? What am I doing in the way that I communicate, in the way that I connect with people that's getting in the way of our getting the outcomes that we're looking for together? If you have people that you trust who love you and will give you that kind of feedback, man, seek that out and then take it seriously. Don't let the walls kind of come up. We get defensive when people become critical of us. Don't let that happen. I can kind of feel it coming up sometimes, and I just shove it back down. I've got a board of 11 people. We had a meeting this morning, and it's not uncommon in board meetings. You can have 11 people in there, plus my executive team. There's probably about over 20 people in the room, and a director will look at me and just say, well, Jeremy, I think that was a bad decision. Let me tell you why. And they're in front of everybody. They'll tell you how you didn't perform well and how you can do better in these areas. And as leaders, we've got to be able to sit there in a public setting and take that gracefully and listen to what's being said about us and look for it might be a kernel of truth in that, where you think, okay, I don't necessarily agree with 70% of what he said, but that 30%, that hits home. I need to do better in that area. But if the walls are coming up and we just get defensive, there's no chance of ever, getting leverage there and pushing ahead in those areas. That's a long answer to your question, but that's been the most powerful event in my life, I think, that's prompted me to do what you asked about.
I have one question I want to make sure I ask. Does anyone else have another question concerning during this time?
You talked about the hiring process.
Can you stand up?
Sure. You talked about the hiring process and how that established kind of a culture. Are there other things that you do in the business to help define culture and increase the way you do business?
The thing, other things to do to define culture. One thing, a lot of things, but the one that I think is most effective is being careful with technology. And Jeremy's going to laugh when I say this. We have a rule in our organization where if we're in a meeting and a cell phone goes off, you pay $50 to Children's Hospital. So there's $50 right there. And in fact, if I'm in the meeting, I don't want to see your phones. I don't want to see any technology. I want people fully present. Because I think technology is great, but I think in leadership roles, it is being overused with respect to inspiring performance and connecting with people. There's things you can do via texting and email and all the other channels that you can use technologically, but the human heart, despite all the changes in technology over the years, the human heart is the human heart. And I don't think that's changed. And people still like to feel like they're valued. They want to be treated with respect, with dignity. They want people to listen to them, you know. And I think there is no substitute for simply meeting with people face to face. That is still the most powerful medium to connect with somebody and to make a difference. And so what I do is making myself available. That 1/3 of the time that I'm in the office is spent primarily meeting with people. And again, one-on-one in small groups, walking the building. You know, we've got a big building, just walking the floors. And it can just be shaking hands with people and saying, hey, you know, and I've worked with some of these people for 25 and 30 years, so I know their kids' names. And you ask about their husbands and their wives, and just keeping up with all that. And you might think, so the CEO just wandered around today and did nothing? Yeah. You know, but sometimes I'll get notes from employees that say, hey, thanks for coming by today. It was good to see you. You know, and thanks for asking about my son. And those are the things in the end that connect people, and they help you realize, you know, that guy cares. And so sometimes we just get distracted with a whole lot of stuff, and we kind of ignore the human heart. Don't do that. You know, use technology for what it's there for, but don't let it substitute for your connection to other human beings. That's a very powerful thing, and I think many folks today are completely overlooking that, and they're missing the boat. As believers, I think that's the best way to connect. You know, I suppose if Jesus was here today, he might be using texting or whatever, you know, but I have a hard time seeing that. You know, when people met him, he made an impression on them. You know, they wanted to follow him, just having met the guy for a few seconds. And that tells me there's something to this human connection that can be really, really powerful in leadership roles. So don't overlook that.
What are some keys you could give to us in terms of, because it's in the context of relationship. So when you talk about multiplying into other people, so that your team has greater capacity, it's not just about the CEO. You know, that's, if you could give them some top tips on multiplying into other people and growing teams.
Well, what I would suggest is as I meet with teams of, like yesterday, we had 6 new employees that joined us. Also in that meeting was a five-year veteran IT senior leader. So he's been around a while. He knows our culture and our values. And the only reason he was there, in addition to introduce himself and be a part of what was going on there, is that I wanted him to hear me and to reconnect with the message that I give those new people as they come in the door. And I'm just refreshing it in his mind. You know, he heard it a while back. He sees things in the course of business regularly, but I want him to come back in for a refresher. You know, oh yeah, Tony is still saying these same things he said 5 years ago, you know, and it just reminds him. And so when he goes back and he's leading his team, what I'm hoping is that will be fresh on his mind, and that he will continue to keep that alive in his team, because the bigger you get, the tougher it is for any one person to be everywhere doing that. And so you need, it's almost like sending out your own missionaries to do evangelical work on your behalf, but they've got to be a part of that. And so I look for opportunities to bring these people into those settings so that in places I can't be, they're out there for me, but that the message stays consistent, it stays alive and moving forward. It just takes attention given that. That's all it takes.
Any other questions for Tony?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for sharing.
What's your name?
I'm Seth. I'm from Rutgers, actually. New Jersey. My question is about how you mentioned earlier how you were used to be very, I guess, task-oriented in a sense, with making sure the numbers are formatted right and this stuff. Can you share a little bit about your transition into becoming more relationship-driven, and what suggestions you would have for someone who is task-oriented to focus more on relationships and how you would transition?
Good question. Are you like that? Are you like I used to be? Is that you? All right. That's a tough thing to admit sometimes in a group setting, isn't it? You know, it can be painful, I'll tell you that, because my nature is not to be up here talking about these things. You know, it used to be, you give me some numbers, you're going to laugh at me. You give me a spreadsheet, and I used to be happy. And today, quite frankly, with all due respect, I wouldn't go back to be a chief financial officer ever. That just isn't what brings me any satisfaction anymore. That's a critical role. It needs to be done. But I've got some great people that do that. And today, this trip, it's a matter of someone, in my case, holding my hand. And so spending time with people who do that well, watching them, being courageous, taking some steps, just one step at a time. If you're not comfortable in group settings where all of a sudden you're in a big group of people and you don't know anybody in the room, you don't get better at that until you just keep doing it. The more you do it, just introducing yourself to people and, ask. Maybe come in your head, just come up with 2 or 3 questions that most people tend to relate to, that are always kind of in your head ready to ask. They can connect you to other people around you and just gradually begin to open up and realize that these relationships are important. And then as you will, and where's Anthony? I learned at lunch now you know everybody in New York City. And you just happen to be sitting next to each other, so you might connect with him because he obviously knows how to do this. Anthony, you can teach me too. Well, I didn't say technology was bad, but as you connect with people like this, what ends up happening is that God uses those connections, and things begin happening. Years ago, on one of the walls in my office, we put up the phrase, "Relationships are all there is, period." And my marketing people, when they put that up, they came to my office and they said, "Why did you ask me to put that up there? What does that mean?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you what that means. Well, you discover what that means." And as we began to get more externally oriented in our company, through these relationships, business would just flow in. I would go downtown and meet somebody at a meeting and get their business card. They'd get mine. A week later, they'd call me up. "Hey, looked into your company. And some people are telling me good things about what you do and how you do it. I'd like to do business with you. And by the way, I've got a company here. I lead a company of about 100 employees. I'd like our group to be served by your credit union. Would you guys consider taking us in?" And all that was me going downtown and having lunch with somebody. But people like to do business with people that they know, who they share common values with, who they respect. Those are the places we tend to go back and do business with. And I think it's with anything else in life. You just love hanging out with people that you enjoy hanging out with, that you share some common things with. But how would they know what they share in common with you, with me, unless you're out there engaging, connecting with folks and trying to learn about them? And so really it's a step-by-step process. It doesn't happen overnight. But just as my hand was held through that process, someone like an Anthony can hold yours or others, and that they can kind of guide us through that to where we not only get better at it, but we see the impact, and after a while, you begin to enjoy it. That may not be my DNA, but today, I thrive on it. If I go a day and I'm just in my office by myself getting stuff done, to me, that's just boring. And I used to think that was fabulous. It used to be if anybody came in the door to interrupt me, it might be a bad day. And today, when I'm just bored out of my mind in my office, I got to get out. I got to connect with people. And so it can happen to us. You just got to want it, work on it, connect with people who are good, who can show us the way.
I want to make sure we honor Tony's time because he has to head out to the Chamber of Commerce to speak there. But I appreciate you and what you've shared with us today. And
you are most welcome. Thank you.
He has demonstrated this in my life, oftentimes privately, leading Campus Renewal, just encouraging me to be more relational, encouraging me to build our team, to multiply into others. Sometimes as leaders, one of the things that Tony's challenged me a lot to is sometimes as leaders you can get so focused on what you're doing or doing things that are immediately around you that you don't think that your primary goal is really to invest into others. But the more, especially with Campus Renewal, we're all about relationships. We are all about building those networks. We all are about, whether we succeed or fail is often the degree in which we build relationships in our different campuses. So it's real critical for us to learn and to grow and to multiply everything we do into others. It's almost better for us to train somebody else to do something than for us to do it ourselves oftentimes, those of us who are leading the different hubs. And so I think Tony exemplifies that. And what I want you to leave here remembering is that he started as that CFO, right? And he's been able, through a lot of mentors in his life, other people that have poured into him, and also through humility and being able to own up to when you do things that are wrong. And sometimes many times he's done that for me. he's shared with me hard things, in our board meetings and in other times privately that I needed to change. And if we are unwilling to change, if we're unwilling to have that humility, then billions of mentors in the world won't do you any good, right? But with the humility plus others that care about you, we can progress forward as a team. And so I just want you to leave this time remembering the example of what Tony has shared with us and lived. And so thanks for coming and being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
And we appreciate it very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.